That took an eternity. I think we're done now.
But they're there.
We're
Nice
good.
to see you
We're
guys
good.
this morning.
All right. Thank you so much for your patience. Welcome to Braveheart Conversations. I'm Jillian Aurora, and this is my beautiful co-host Marie Wallace.
Good morning.
We are super happy to be here with you today. And as usual, I just want to say thank you to our listeners who are joining us live today. We're live every Thursday morning. We're actually we're doing great on time today. So yeah, you can find us in our group Braveheart Conversations, and you can also find us on a variety of podcast platforms. So you can check out all of our older episodes in the group or any of those platforms. This morning we are going to be talking about evaluating our relationships. So I think that sometimes it can be really confusing to know, is this a relationship that's healthy for me? Is this something that I need to consider leaving? Those are questions that I think both of us are often approached with. And it can kind of swing back and forth where sometimes we're thinking, oh my gosh, I really need to get out of here because this is not working for me. And then other times where you're thinking, oh, but man, I love him or he loves me or whatever the situation is. It can be really confusing. So I want
It's a good evaluation, even if you're in a long-term relationship.
Right.
Just to,
How
check
are
on it.
we?
Yeah, how are we? What do we need to work on?
Yeah. So let's dig into that. I think, first of all, I want to talk about the things that keep us from evaluating our relationship. Because I think that it's a scary process. It's something that we often avoid doing because there's a lot of value and moral strings attached. So this is where our programming can really get in our way of being honest and having an honest evaluation. Often our programming around vows and marriage and long-term relationships and unconditional love
And
these
loyalty.
yeah, these are all things that keep us from even asking the questions and feeling wrong about asking the questions. It keeps us in a state of denial. So this is where I just want to point out, if you truly have no non-negotiables, like if you believe that you cannot leave a marriage or a relationship and that it would be wrong to do so, then you're going to have a very hard time being honest with yourself about the health of that relationship. Also, we often think that we can have non-negotiables and we can have standards and believe that we're never going to leave a relationship. Those are actually exclusive. You have to believe one or the other. If you choose to believe that I will never ever leave a relationship no matter what, you've given up, you've forfeited any standards or non-negotiables. They cannot coexist. So generally, what I find when people say leaving is never ever an option, they just haven't explored that thought very well. Because, if you say, well, what if they hit you? What if they molested one of your children? Like, there are non-negotiables, and often we just haven't really been honest about what they are. And I really advocate for getting really clear about what your non-negotiables are, what your standards are, because we often are really fuzzy on those standards. But we do have to look at that belief, that underlying belief. If I truly believe that no matter what, I'll never leave, then it's very difficult to be honest about the state of a relationship. Do you have something to add on that piece?
No, I agree. Oftentimes, and looking at our values, sometimes there's a conflict in the values, which goes back to what you were saying about the marriage vows. I might really value loyalty. I want that and I want to give that. And so that becomes a conflict. And like you said, it can't coexist in the relationship. If I'm going to be really honest, I have to know what I value and what's more important and prioritize those values. So that
Yeah.
would be the only thing I add.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find for myself, my beliefs around unconditional love were a huge sticking point for me because I equated unconditional love with unconditional loyalty. And those are two very, very different things. I I truly believe today unconditional love. I'm a believer in unconditional love. I love wholeheartedly many, many people. And I also believe that that does not entitle them to my loyalty. I am not unconditionally loyal. So I can unconditionally love someone and not allow them in my space. My love is unconditional, but my but my loyalty is not, and my presence is not. So that's a really key distinction that helped me really get honest and heal. So once we've kind of, and that's a really scratching the surface. That is not a big overhaul of that topic. We certainly have gone into that in previous episodes in depth, but I did want to bring that into this discussion just because it is really relevant to being honest in our relationships.
Well, if you're going to do an assessment, it doesn't do you any good to not be honest, because then it's not a valid assessment.
Exactly, and I think many of us are just really scared to go there because we're scared of the truth. We're scared of the answers that we're going to come up with, and so many of us just avoid it until it's so painful.
Or the answers and you don't want to go there.
Yeah. So let's talk about what would be some of the things that we point out as things that maybe are not healthy or things that are healthy in a relationship if we're really going to do that honest evaluation. Something for me that Marie and I were chatting about before we started here is the desire on both parties to have a win-win solution. That for me is a standard in my relationship. If I bring up something to my partner that bothers me, that's hurtful to me, there's a desire on both parts to find a solution that works for both of us. And if, vice versa, if my partner comes to me and says, this is really bothering me and it's hurting me, that I also have that same willingness. And that we have the bravery to say, to have those hard conversations that may end in saying, this doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
To have that level of honesty to ourselves, like our commitment to ourselves, like that is also really rare, but I believe that that is true love. So, Marie, if you want to share more too on that win-win.
Well, for me, I just have been in relationships where they either gave you the silent treatment, so you didn't even talk about it, right? If there was a conflict, just don't talk. I'm not going to talk to you for days. And then I would have the opposite where they were screaming in your face and getting both of us so escalated that of course when you're in that mode you can't even think. And then we would never circle back to solving the problem. Mm-hmm. So in that case, it wasn't a good, viable relationship because there was not even a conversation, let alone, and I would think that that's also on both our parts not being honest, that we're not able to come to a solution. So it has to come to a win-win, otherwise it's not mutual, it's not a relationship. We're not a partner.
Yep, and that was the follow-up piece is if you're seeing that there isn't a win-win, a desire for win-win, if there's one partner that's okay with a win-lose, basically like I'm going to get my way and, even if you're really unhappy about it, then it doesn't matter. Like that means you're not in a partnership, you're in a hierarchy, which has been the old way of doing things, right? Mm-hmm. For most of history, women have been a childlike. They've been a what's the word I'm looking for? They're property.
Yeah. Well, it's honor and obey in the marriage laws. Honor and obey.
Right. They've been a piece of property. So that is hierarchy. That is saying, you must submit and obey not as a partner, but as a piece of my property. That's a very different dynamic than a partnership. So, and I'm not saying that there's a lot of that exists, and there are a lot of women that choose to be in a hierarchy. And what I mean by that is they choose to be in a relationship that is governed by, my husband is a leader and I follow and I submit to what he says. That is our choice. We have autonomy to make that choice.
And if it works for you, then
then you're the one that gets to say when that is what you want or don't want. For me, I'm really not okay with that dynamic. I want a partnership, which a partnership means we're both invested in a win-win solution. Um, and, if you think about this being very similar to a great friendship or even a business partnership. If you're in a business partnership, you don't have one person calling all the shots and making the decisions and, one person submitting. Both people are saying, no, if this doesn't benefit both of us, then it's a no, right? Same thing with a friendship. We're not really invested in who's in charge. We just have a friendship, right? And
it's teamwork and it's mutual support. And
exactly. And so if you're not finding those partnership dynamics, that's something to really evaluate. Again, like when we're talking about evaluation, it's not about a right and wrong and, what is good or bad. It's what you want. This always goes back to what you want, what you choose. So
and what's working and not working.
right.
Yeah.
So if you identify in your evaluation, oh, I don't have a win-win relationship, I have a win-lose where, he calls the shots and we go that way, or vice versa. I'm calling the shots and I can tell he's disgruntled and he doesn't want to go that way. Either way, you're identifying, okay, this is what it is. Am I okay with that? So this is not about us dictating what's good and bad in a relationship, but saying, like, evaluate that honestly and be honest about whether or not that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to tell you, oh, yeah, this isn't a win-win relationship. Is that what I want? How do I bring it back around that way, or is it possible to? Because there's two people in a relationship, and you can't just fix whatever you want, because again, it's a partnership. So both people are making decisions. All right. So hierarchy versus partnership. Safety, yeah. Which ties hand in hand with boundaries, which was
always
what I was thinking of next. Yeah. So when you make a claim to safety, meaning, I feel unsafe when this happens, will you please do this so that I feel safe? Or, setting a boundary that this is a requirement to be in my space, any of those types of pleas for safety or requirements for safety. If your partner's response is not, how can we solve this? How can we make this better? If the response is defensiveness and justification and, well, too bad, apathy, that's something to get really honest about. Again, this goes back to this is not a partnership. This is a hierarchy, and potentially we're getting into some abusiveness here, where if someone can't accept a no, and if someone can't accept a safety, so it doesn't matter if I'm in a partnership with a romantic partner or anyone else. If someone comes to me and says, tells me a boundary that they have, a requirement to be in their space or be in a relationship with them, I may choose not to continue the relationship depending on what that is. There's certain things that may just not be a fit for me, and there's nothing wrong with saying a relationship isn't a fit, but I will never ever tell them their boundary is irrelevant, justify why I should be able to break it. Those are all things that are just not acceptable. So
also just thinking about, am I able to use my voice in this relationship? Do I feel safe to express what I'm feeling, what my concerns are, and back to the boundaries, what I expect and want from my expectations, wants, and needs in a relationship without feeling unsafe. Mm-hmm. So especially using my voice, it's so important, and I think a lot of women's voices have been repressed, especially in a marriage situation. And so back to the programming, we haven't been we've been programmed not to express what we want, what we hope for, what our desires and hopes and dreams are for this relationship, and so we suppress them, which makes us more frustrated, and then then we become that explosive. It's something that you it is okay for you to ask for what you want, and it's okay for your partner to ask. That's what mutual support is: asking, listening, and receiving, feeling honored and valued in the relationship, that my voice is able to be heard and I get to be an equal partner in this relationship.
And that's where I think if it is a true partnership, that's what we both want. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want a friendship, Marie, like I wouldn't want a friendship with you where I know that you're just like putting up with
Yeah,
me, you know.
or vice versa. Yeah.
Right. We are invested in each other's happiness and you and I feeling respected and honored.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't be it wouldn't be a friendship if one of us was just showing up and like, well, I guess we'll do it that way.
I'd be
'Cause that's what
using you.
yeah, like,
Or, yeah.
but I wouldn't like it if you were that way. If you were
Yeah.
coming to me and, well, I'll just do it your way. Just, you know, I
Mhm.
don't really like that, but I'll do it your way. Like, I wouldn't want that, you know?
That'd be boring too.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, I think being very aware of how boundaries are received. This is such um, a great assessment tool for me in relationships. It's really easy to get along when there isn't any conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you lay a boundary and you say, you know, I'm really not comfortable with that, whatever that is, and to get their response. And that's been very telling for me in relationships. As soon as I have that difficult conversation and confront about something that is not working for me,
Yeah.
is that igniting a flame where all of a sudden that relationship is on the rocks? Or are you getting the response like, oh, well, tell me more about that?
Mm-hmm.
How
I
can
had
we?
no idea. Like
Mhm.
sometimes your partner has no idea that that's how you feel until you say it.
Yeah, and that response is incredibly telling. You will get people's true colors when you set some boundaries and have those difficult conversations. And you know those things range from the aggressive
But yeah, oh yeah, go ahead.
or ghosting.
Yeah.
There's a huge range of potential responses to your boundaries that you get to watch out for, because there's the type that are defensive and come up with,
In your face.
yeah, and then there's some that just will ghost. They'll just
Silent treatment.
they'll
And,
avoid the conversation, and they'll just avoid any sort of conflict, which is also a pretty big red flag. Um, there was something else I was gonna say. It slipped my mind.
well, if it does get to the point of an argument, that's also an indicator. If it's okay to have conflict, and Jillian and I talk about that all the time. Conflict is good and it's healthy. It lets you know, indicates that there's something that's not feeling right or comfortable. But it's how you handle that conflict that is actually telling. Are you able to speak up? Do you have some fair fighting rules and rules of engagement in place? Is it okay to speak back and forth? Do you have a way, if you both get heated, to move away? Are you able to self-regulate, or do you just go off the handle? Does your partner just go off the handle and not be able to self-regulate their temper? Are you self-aware enough of how you are in the relationship, as far as, are you holding back? Are you aggressive? So just thinking about those ways of handling the conflict. So it's important to have the conflict, because then it lets you know where things need to be tweaked or monitored or adjusted. But it's also an indicator if that argument or conflict is not, what's the word I'm looking for? If you're both not just working together for solutions, and that's a mutual support again. If you're both not supporting each other and finding those win-win solutions, and it just is, you know, like, yeah, back to self-regulation and self-awareness. How is it going?
I think this brings up a really good point too, that you can't have a healthy relationship with one or both parties being unhealthy. And so often what
So
I
true.
see is one partner doing a lot of work on themselves. They're reading books and taking courses and like obsessing about making themselves and the relationship better, while the other person is really checked out. They're not invested in any sort of self-development. They're not invested in seeing any of their own defects to work on. And it's solely on one partner to do the work. That dynamic is really tough, because one person is generally wanting to make it work so hard and so bad. But when you have a partner that has, anger issues or has these things, it's inevitable that when one person is saying, hey, this is hurting me, they don't have the emotional capacity or the bandwidth to even receive that information. They're going to receive that as taking it personal. It's a personal slam. It's you're saying I'm a bad person. You're, instead of actually being able to work on some solutions.
We have a friend who says they don't have the will or the skill, and I like that, because either they don't want to work on it or they don't have the skill to work on it because they haven't been doing personal development.
Well, and if they don't have the skill or even the willingness to go get the skill,
might not be a good fit.
Yeah. So I think to call out any illusions that you're actually going to be able to make a relationship better when you have a partner who really has no interest in seeing their part. You're wasting a lot of breath, and I like to say, stop expecting sick people to act well. Sometimes we are expecting someone to have the emotional capacity to deal with finding solutions with some complex relationship problems, and they don't have that ability. They haven't developed it. They don't have a desire to develop it. And there's no amount of you doing the work for them that is ever going to change their ability to work through these problems.
And no amount of you pointing out that they have this problem, because I've worked with people too that they're always telling the partner what's wrong with them. They know what's wrong with them, or at least they have an indicator. It's not your business; it's their business. So as far as you don't have to constantly, repeatedly tell someone how they need to grow, fix, change, or what their defects are, I guess.
Yeah, and I've seen many, many women trying to hold all of the weight of the relationship. Doing the work of both parts,
both people.
And it's never going to work. It's never going to feel fulfilling, because that again is an illusion of a partnership. It isn't a true partnership. You can't have a partnership that one person is governing both sides. It's going to cause burnout and a lot of resentment, as it should. A lot of people think that resentment is a bad thing, but resentment is simply an indicator that something is really not working and something is really out of whack. So, I celebrate resentment because it is the ultimate truth teller.
It is.
Right? It is telling you, it's a check engine light that's saying there's something that really needs to be fixed and looked at. So, I think if you're in a relationship where you have, one person doing all the work, that leads me to the next concern to me, which is I see a lot of people prioritizing the relationship above the individuals. And when we do that, and I think we do that a lot, this kind of goes back to what I said at the very beginning, where we think that challenging the relationship is a morally wrong thing to do. But when we prioritize the relationship above the individuals, I think we've really lost sight of what a relationship is intended to do. I believe the function of a relationship is to support and empower both individuals, right? We're supposed to be better people as a result of our relationship. Our relationship is supposed to be this container for nourishment and growth and empowerment. And so it should be functioning to help me be serving my purpose on this planet, and really helping me bolster me in my calling, and as well as my partner. And so if it isn't doing that, then we really get to challenge what's going on in the relationship. Either the relationship really just needs to go, or we're seeing two partners who are invested in their growth. We're seeing a partner who is invested in a win-win solution. If you have only one partner that is hoping to, you know, make the relationship a nourishing place for both people, then you it's sad to tell you, but you can't make a relationship happen with one person. A relationship by definition is two people. Two people
Back to what you
desiring
said,
each
you'll
other.
be exhausted and you'll be resentful.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find yourself at your wit's end going, I just don't know, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
might be an indicator to look at, are you being honest in
Mm-hmm.
that assessment?
And that's a great question to ask too, is when I look at us as individuals in this relationship, are we the best versions of ourselves? Is our relationship encouraging us to be healthy in our bodies, be healthy in our minds? Is it empowering us to
Spirit.
be in our calling and serving the planet? You know, that's a great question to ask for both people. Is this serving us? Is it
Are you both growing
nourishing
and
us?
learning and thriving?
Mhm.
Thriving is a good one too. Mm-hmm.
Or is it creating struggle? Is it creating
Struggle's
struggle?
okay, but not. I mean, just looking at the overall happiness, is your overall contentment? Is it easy and overall happy? Because that's a pretty big indicator too. Or am I spending most of my days and time
Mm-hmm.
struggling and arguing and
Yep.
yeah? So just look at the overall picture. That's a good place to start. I mean, and be really honest. Not those intermittent, because us women, I think, will last forever with that one little piece of, oh, he did this really nice thing for me. He's really kind in this one. Well, no, that's just one time. Overall, give it a percentage.
Yeah.
Well, that would be really honest. Give it a percentage from 1 to 100%. Where does the relationship lie on contentment? And that'll give you a pretty big.
Yeah, there was a phenomenal coach I worked with who said with a percentage, sometimes we're clinging to that, 20% or 10% of the time that is really great and we have a great partnership and it's loving versus, the time that we're putting up with that's maybe 80 or 90%. And realistically, I think if we're looking at a healthy relationship, it's really great 80 or 90% of the time.
Mhm.
And then there's some struggle a smaller percentage of the
because
time.
life happens and you
Well,
both are figuring it out, and
and
then there's
I also think that when we're talking about struggle, there's struggle that is created by the relationship,
sure.
and there's struggle that just happens in life.
Mhm.
And those are two very different things. So if your relationship is actually creating struggle, it may be serving more as a distraction from your calling and from your purpose and from what ultimately is your successful, thriving, happy life. That may be more of a distraction and a block and a hindrance
Mhm.
from living in your purpose and in your, best self, versus there is struggle that happens outside of
Sure.
us. There's life struggle, there's deaths that happen, there's injuries that happen, there's all sorts of things that happen in life, but that struggle isn't coming from the relationship. That relationship actually, in those sorts of situations, should be a safe haven, right? That's a place where you can say, oh my gosh, I'm going through this horrible thing and I'm so grateful that I have this partner that is supporting me through it. It's a place that we go for.
There's enough battles out in the battlefield, right?
Hell yeah, there is.
we need some place to go that we feel safe.
And it's not that your relationship is going to be rainbows and kittens all the time. Like we've talked about, there's difficult conversations that we get to have. There's conflict that does get to happen. But how does that happen? When you bring up something that bothers you or creates a feeling of unsafety, how is that responded to? Is it something that the other person is saying, yes, I want to hear more about that, and I'm curious about why you feel that way, and if there's a solution that can be had, is there a concern for your concerns or your concerns, their
like
concerns? I think that those are very telling things.
Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah,
or?
I'm checking here, and I'm not seeing any questions. Speak up now before we wrap it up. Marie, do you have anything more to say about just the prioritization of a relationship versus the individuals? Um,
Just overall, I think honesty in the whole thing is really what's most telling. And as we've talked, I just realized how much more important those percentages are, because it really does show you the big picture of things, and then you can break it down and know that that happens in your relationship for however long the relationship is. Going back and doing these assessments just at least lets you know where you need to work on, if you need to work on something, but it also lets you know if it's a good fit still. Because even after, I mean, I've seen people even after 40 years, they go, it's not a good fit anymore, because they've grown and learned and changed. And so just that's why honesty is so, so important.
I think, I'd like to give a little bit of a personal example too. So, I can remember, having a lot of the old programming and beliefs, like I really, no matter what, I'm not leaving this relationship. And I joined a lot of, personal development programs, recovery programs, just to help me deal with the relationship and put up with some really awful behavior. And in that relationship, I remember having conflicts and feeling very alone, because the conflicts were very much like, gaslighting. And when I would bring up feeling unsafe or feeling scared, the response was, well, I don't like being with a scared partner, so you should come back when you feel not scared. And instead of, being curious about, well, what's making you feel unsafe,
Mm-hmm.
and how can we get through this? There really wasn't any desire. It was very one-sided. Well, if you feel unsafe, then those are issues for you to fix. And it created a lot of loneliness in that relationship, and a ton of fear. I was scared to be at home. Often I was scared to sleep. I would often record all night long to catch any of the verbally abusive things that would be said. I would pretend to be asleep so that it would be done faster. There were a lot of things that went on in that relationship where there really was no investment of my partner to work on himself at all. It was solely on me. If I wanted to make the relationship work, then that was on me. Versus being in a healthy relationship today, if I bring up anything that, this is feeling unequal, or this is bothering me, or I feel, I feel hurt, or whatever the situation is, getting a response from my partner that is, wow, that's really not okay with me. I want you to feel safe and heard, and, whatever.
What can I do?
Yeah, how can we fix this? That is so much more honoring, and it's not lonely. It's something that feels very honoring, and we're still very human, so it's not like we don't have those moments that are like, I feel hurt, or this is bothering me, or this is annoying, or whatever the thing is, but we can speak freely, and we can know the other person is going to care. And that's a partnership. That's what's different. As any friendship is the same way. If you're getting something that's just dismissive, if it's you're bringing up something hard,
it's
and
one-sided,
it's dismissed,
too.
yeah. And as humans, yeah, I mean, I can guarantee you, if you're in a relationship with me long enough, I'll hurt you. I'm human.
Yeah.
But how do we deal with that? And are we both going to care enough to fix those things, and take responsibility, and continue to get curious and work on ourselves? So that's the difference to me. It's not that we don't make any mistakes. It's not that we're perfect. It's that we're very willing to take accountability and responsibility for making changes and growing.
Our soul's calling for more. It always does.
Mm-hmm.
And so just look at that and feel what your soul's calling for. These relationships are for nurturing your soul and for growing to be the best version of yourself. And is this relationship honoring that growth process of becoming more and a better person? So,
Yep.
good
That's what it's
conversation.
all about. Yeah, it is a great conversation. Thank you guys for being here. Jessica, so good to see you. Good to have you. All right, with that, we will close up. And as usual, I forgot to bring up our next week's topic. Let me just grab that really quick so that you guys are all aware of what we're speaking about next week. We are now into our February
I know.
topics. That is crazy. We got through January, which was definitely
it went fast.
It was a heavy month, though. I mean, the topics that we talked about were there is some heavy stuff. If you guys missed it, then go check it out because we did a lot of family,
toxic relationships,
leaving abusive relationships. I think January was a heavy month, but it was really productive. It was a great truth telling.
It is
month. All right, here we go. So we are on, I think, episode 73.
Wow.
Right? Yep. And so we are on taking personal responsibility in relationships. So this should be a really fun follow-up to our topic today. Today is that relationship assessment. Next week, we're going to be talking about taking responsibility. So basically our own side of the street,
yeah,
right?
What's my part in this?
Clean up your own side of the street. So that'll be fun next week. We are here every Thursday, generally around 10-ish. So hope to catch you then. If you have any questions or comments for us, feel free to reach out to our individual emails if you'd like. I can be reached at defytheaverage@gmail.com. And Marie
at mariesgold.com.
So if you have any questions or comments or challenges, feel free to reach out. With that, I hope you all have a fantastic week. Remember that we love you, and we will see you next Thursday. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.